plan is to read the second chapter of Luke. Now, don't be looking at what we're doing so far and think we're going to read every chapter. We don't have that many weeks to read every chapter. But I wanted us to read the first 2 chapters at least, and then I'll be pulling out selections after this for each Wednesday night, and we'll do some reading and discuss the text that we've read. Anything else we want to discuss in the process. And Jason, if you'd get that door over there, please, too. And John, you want to get that one? Oh. Brother Dowell going to get it. Have the Carolyn's got the thing? Who wants to? Looks like we've got 2 left. Who wants to read? Yep.
I read up on Luke being a doctor.
Yes.
And it led back into the Egyptians and their doctrine. It was really good on the internet. An Egyptian doctor had to follow an exact way to heal people, and they had specialized doctors, eyes, ears, nose, throat, they had a whole shebang. And if a person died because you did not follow procedure exactly, the doctor died. So if Luke was any kind of doctor, he probably studied in Egypt. If he was any kind of doctor that he kept talking about.
Under the EMA, the Egyptian Medical Association. Yeah. Well, that's scary stuff. That's like being a prison guard. You let your prisoner get away, you die. Are all the assignments passed out? All right, well, I'm assuming they are because there were only 2 left when they came back to over here and they went across the aisle and somebody's probably nabbed them. So, okay, whoever's got the first verse of chapter 2, go ahead and take off and we'll just read successively until we finish the chapter. 8 readers is what we'll have.
brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every male that opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice according to that which is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. And behold, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simon. Simon or Simeon?
I call him Simeon.
Simeon. And the same man was just and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Ghost was upon him. And it was revealed unto him by the Holy Ghost that he should not see death before he had seen the Lord Christ.
And he came in the Spirit into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to carry out for him the custom of the law, then he took him into his arms and blessed God and said, Now, Lord, you are releasing your bondservant to depart in peace, according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light of revelation to the Gentiles, and the glory of your people Israel. And his father and mother were amazed at the things which were being said about him. And Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rise of many in Israel, and for a sign to be opposed. And a sword will pierce even your own soul to the end, that thoughts from many hearts may be revealed.
Now there was one Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was of great age and had lived with the husband 7 years from her virginity. And this woman was a widow of about 84 years, who did not depart from the temple, but served God with fastings and prayers night and day. And coming in that instant, she gave thanks to the Lord and spoke of him to all who looked for redemption in Jerusalem. So when they had performed all these things according to the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own city Nazareth. And the child grew and became strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him.
Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to custom. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know it, but supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey. But then they began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances. And when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem, searching for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions.
And all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. So when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, Son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father and I have sought you anxiously. And he said to them, What is it that you sought me? Did you not know that I must be about my father's business? But they did not understand the statement which he spoke to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject to them. But his mother kept all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men.
Very good. Thank you all for reading. Am I still on? We look sounding good? Okay. I'll make mention before we start on our questions, in case you have encountered any detractors who doubt that there was a census, or this census took place under Quirinius. When you read in Acts chapter 5, of course Luke wrote Acts as well. In Acts chapter 5, he mentions that, or he records that it was mentioned that a census that was taking place in Judea was causing an uprising there. That was the second census at least, but this one was the first one. If you look at chapter 2 and verse 2 in Luke 2 and 2, so this was the first census taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. Now, if you're writing historically and you say the first, what does that imply?
That had never been done before.
Okay, it's never been done before, and what other possibility?
Others came after.
There's going to be another after it. So this was the first one. The one that's mentioned in Acts 5 took place about 6 or 7 BC, but this one was a couple of years before that. So Luke is historically accurate in saying that there was a first one. Detractors have said that, well, there's no record of this census, but there was a record found of the other census. Well, that record it was almost by chance that they found that record. Besides this is a record right here, which detractors will often say, oh, that's not a record. But if you found this in any other writing, it would be considered a record. Nevertheless, record was found of the second one, and they're saying, well, since there's only one piece of extant evidence, and I use that word extant again. Everybody familiar with the word extant, E-X-T-A-N-T? There's a TV show on now called Extant. I don't watch it. Don't know that much about it, but the word means available to put your hands on, essentially. Now, there's some things we can't put our hands on because they're gone, but if something is extant, that means it exists somewhere in the world and you can go see it. You can lay your hands on it. But this piece of evidence that talks about the second census is all there is. And so they say, well, we can know there was that census because we've got one thing in evidence for it. But if there's only one, isn't it possible that there was a previous one? We just don't have the evidence for it except for this record. So I just wanted to make mention of that there were at least two, and one of those is mentioned in Acts 5. Okay. Now, first question. Have you ever wondered why God did not make things more convenient for Joseph and Mary? What were the inconveniences? Did they have a lot of money? They didn't have a lot of money. It was about 70 miles, thereabouts, as the crow flies. And you know you never go as the crow flies. From Nazareth to Bethlehem. There had to be some expense involved. If you just take a trip and stay anywhere overnight, even if you're camping, you got to pay for food. You got to give somebody some money for lodging. And Mary, what about Mary? She was pregnant, carried a child. And the timing was such that when she got to Bethlehem, it's time to give birth. She's full term. Any other discomfitures?
There's no inn.
No room in the inn. There was an inn, but there wasn't any room in the inn. Nobody said, hey, we'll get our stuff out of here and let that lady who's about to give birth have our room. So they wound up in a place where animals were fed. And that's where Jesus came into the world. So I guess the question is a yes or no question. You either have or you haven't thought about why God didn't make things easier. If you were sending your son into the world, what circumstances would you be looking for? The best. If you were going to send your son or your daughter overseas right now. No, you're not even going to no, we're not going to do that. We're not sending them overseas. We're going to keep them right here at home. But God sent his son overseas. He sent him into poverty. And not just physical poverty, but spiritual poverty. And he sent him in a situation where there were not a lot of comforts. Whatever comforts they had, they did not have many. Why would he do that? Right. What was the question that people asked when they found out Jesus was from Nazareth? Yeah, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Is there any place in Oklahoma you can think of that you might say that I can't, no place comes to mind? Your hometown, where's that? Granola? There's a Granola, Oklahoma. 27 people. If they counted him. Where's that? Boley? Well, you guys are at least calling your hometowns. That's okay. Well, that's the way Nazareth was looked at. He wasn't even born in what's that? Oh, Clovis. Okay. Well, I don't know anything about Clovis, except that there's a Clovis Point. That's not a place you can go to. That's a type of spear point. But Daisy?
I looked at it on Google, and it's just a wine road. Daisy Oklahoma.
There are all kinds of little spots just everywhere. I didn't know until just a couple of years ago that the corner of Choctaw Road and 29th is called Wood. Anybody else know that? That's Woods? Okay, Woods. Okay, well, there is? Okay, I guess I've just missed it. Oh. Well, if they put it in Choctaw, it might not have got robbed. So. It's God's country. And Jesus was born in a place, however, that most folks evidently would not have said that's God's country. They said, Nazareth, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Now, Jesus wasn't born in Nazareth, but the prophets had said he would be called a Nazarene. Where was Jesus born? Bethlehem, and his parents, under the circumstances of Pharaoh's, or not Pharaoh, getting him mixed up with Joseph now, which Joseph was a type of Christ, of Herod's ruling, they moved to Nazareth for safety, and that was to fulfill the prophecy. Well, and he could have moved anywhere, but they moved to Nazareth to wind up fulfilling that prophecy about Jesus being a Nazarene. Number two, what did Joseph look like? Haven't you seen pictures? Well, I've seen plastic images that light up in people's yards. And Mary, wouldn't it be interesting to know what Mary looked like? I mean, Joseph would be interesting, but Mary, whoa, Mary, that'd be really interesting to know what she looked like. Okay. Well, I guess she's been promoted because she wouldn't have got us here. Interesting. What did Jesus look like? Now there is a biblical description of Jesus. Where is it? Isaiah 52 and 53. I'd start in the last part of chapter 52 and go right on into 53. And if you want to look at that, we can turn over there and look at it real quick. Oh, yeah, 53 also. In the last part of 52, verse 13, God says through his prophet Isaiah, "Behold, my servant will prosper. He will be high and lifted up and greatly exalted. Just as many were astonished at you, my people, so his appearance was marred more than any man." Now see, all that doesn't seem like it goes together. My servant's going to prosper. Well, that sounds good. He'll be high and lifted up. He will be greatly exalted. That sounds good. Just as many were astonished at you, my people, so his appearance was marred more than any man. When Isaiah talks about the astonishment of other people at Israel, he's talking about when Israel is being led away by foreign nations. The Assyrians came. They took the 10 tribes into captivity. And the Assyrians were mean. They would hang people on a wall and skin them alive. They would put hooks, and prophets talked about this, putting hooks in their noses. And these kind of pictures we find on the reliefs that were chiseled out of stone, how the slaves were led away with hooks through their noses. Horrible, horrific treatment, very barbaric. And the other people would look on at Israel and say, well, those are the people of God. I can't believe this is happening to them. So he's talking about the astonishment of other people as they see Israel being led away in captivity. So his appearance was marred. And can you imagine what that would be in reference to? On the cross, and even prior to the cross, he was beaten. He was slapped in the face, and I doubt that those were just little taps. Probably hit pretty hard. He was beaten with a scourge, and probably some of those lashes came around and caught him in the face. Who knows everything that happened to him? You've read about the crown of thorns, but It's also very interesting to me that there's so little detail about the crown of thorns. The text just says they placed a crown of thorns on his head.
Do you think the best description though in verse 14 necessarily correlates with his crucifixion and death and not how he looked naturally? Because after 53:2, it does, I don't want to say that it says that he's ugly, but he had no form of majesty, form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him.
Right.
So it's kind of taking that from 52 and tying that to that, not necessarily barred from wearing the crown of thorns.
But I'm thinking it does mean from the crown of thorns and from the abuse at the crucifixion, because it says in the last part of, or the first part of verse 15, thus he will sprinkle many nations. And I don't think anyone with a Jewish frame of mind would have seen the word sprinkle and thought of anything other than blood, because there was so much sprinkling of blood done according to the law, according to the sacrificial law. And I think what God is picturing for us in the last verses of chapter 52, or what we call chapter 52, is Jesus suffering the abuse that he suffered at the time of his arrest, his trial, his crucifixion, his death. And then in verse 53, it's like he's coming back to, even at his best, he was like a root out of dry ground. Now, I've always pictured him as athletic build, strong guy, in good shape. He almost had to be, based on the life that he lived and the way that he died with strength, because his last words were not whispered with an agonized gasp, but they were shouted out after 6 hours on the cross. He cried loudly, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit, and he gave up his life at that point. His life wasn't taken, he offered it up at that point. And so there was at least some degree of physical strength we could attribute to him, but what he looked like with that, who knows? That's just what we've got.
Saul, when Saul was elected king, and the people look at him and say, he's got to be a king. He's so tall, he's so good looking, he's so strong.
Right.
And when they looked at Jesus, they didn't see that at all.
Right. Same with David. This ruddy little kid, how can he be what we want him to be? And yet David was more than they would have ever expected.
There's a site there was focused on the country, and they were amazed at the answers.
Yes.
That's basically how they saw him.
Right.
And when the 3 First John talked about the Word was God, the Word is God. And when Jesus came to seek and save the lost. And so how Jesus was viewed as God's choice. And I guess maybe, I don't know, I'm just wondering, that was designed so that people would focus on all the kids. And we just call people. And that's not something maybe visual to see, the intellectual things.
Right. And if you think about people that we know, first impressions are often based totally on externals. But the people that you love and appreciate the most, you probably don't even see the externals anymore, because you know who they are because of the relationship that you have and their behavior. And you might realize, oh yeah, this is how you look. But after a while, you don't really pay attention to that anymore, because I've used this analogy in a different way, but I'll use it for this because I think it applies. You might have a very nice looking home, but that might not be what you think of when you come home. You come home, you think, this is where I'm comfortable. Oh man, take my shoes off, take my shirt off. I'm gonna stop right there, because you know what happens when you go home? You get comfortable. You turn on the TV, you flop down on the couch, you roll around in pillows, or if you got little blankets or covers, whatever, and you just enjoy yourself. And you don't think about, this is a beautiful home. Because what makes it beautiful to you is, this is where you can get comfortable. This is where you can be at peace. This is where you can be at ease. And I think that's the way Jesus was. Whatever he looked like once people got to know him, it was, wow.
Coming from the outside, we've been here about 6 months, give or take. And past history with my wife, I'm going up here, her mom and dad, have been here. And about the knowledge of the men here and the church, I see that. And, you have these two phrases, have you seen so-and-so? Have you heard so-and-so? It's not like, you think about some of the preachers in the past, like our Lord, or whoever you heard preach this to you, not that you see it.
Right.
That's power, and that's what I hear coming out of the church, and, that's me feel like I need to turn my thought on. I'm a little bit of what I thought, and maybe I do my thought on that other time, compared to some of the other ministries.
But if you ask them, they'll tell you they don't really know their Bible either, because that's,
Look at the city, hear, see,
right.
and that's all I really is maybe Christ is that's a good thing. You think about having heard. And that's part of, the steps to lead someone to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
You see someone that want to have heard. So that's that power of the word. If we want to become like God, the word is God, so as we take the word in, we become more like God.
Right.
That's just
That's what Paul said. Our glory, we're changing from one glory into another. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. As we look into the Word of God, we look at Christ. It's like we're looking into a mirror, and we're changing gradually from one form of glory into a greater form of glory. And you might be wondering about number 2 there. Why even ask these questions? And here's the reason that I come back to this from time to time, and that is that if the Bible were written by men, you can bet your bottom dollar there'd be some descriptions in here. They'd be saying, Jesus looked like this. He's the Son of God. This is how tall he was. He was a muscular build. He had this kind of hair. He was regal as he walked down the street. There's nothing like that, ever, anywhere. We're not told even one single detail of his physical features, except what we're seeing here in Isaiah, that frankly is not all that complimentary. But what people do say, and what the writers do record, is he talks like one who's got authority, not like the scribes and the Pharisees. Never a man spake like this man. Even the winds and the waves obey him. Those are the kinds of observations that the gospel writers have made about Jesus. Nothing about he was a sharp dresser, or he shaved every day, or he used the best kind of deodorant they had. Nothing.
It was all this time to say, don't look at my face, look at what I am behind my eyes.
It would seem to be. There's no physical attraction. It's all of a spiritual nature. And so when I see, let me back up. When I don't see that stuff, it tells me this must be from God. And it's across the board. I mean, you're from Genesis all the way through Revelation. The only time you see anybody being given a physical description is when that description is pertinent to the record that they're giving. Can you think of any examples? How about Absalom? Tell me about Absalom. Had that hair. Why is that significant? Got his head caught in a tree? Yeah. So, Bobby mentioned Saul. What was significant about Saul? Why'd they make him king? Head and shoulders taller than everybody else. Hey, he's the biggest guy. Let's make him king. That's what they were looking for. Even when Samuel went down to Jesse's house looking for David, he didn't know he was looking for David. He just knew he was looking for one of Jesse's sons. And David's oldest came in, and surely this is the guy. Look at him. And well, no, it's not him. And what did God tell him? God doesn't look on the physical features. He looks on the heart. And so we're seeing that being consistent throughout Scripture. The only time you see anybody described physically is when it is something pertinent to the account. Number 3, why did God send angels to announce Jesus' birth to lowly shepherds and not the religious or political leadership of Israel? Now, obviously, I'm asking for speculation because there's not a verse that says, here's why God sent the angels to the shepherds. Joe? The other guys would have argued with the angels, yeah. Well, seriously, we read about Zacharias last week. Why was Zacharias mute until John was born? He doubted Gabriel's word to him.
The angels with him went to Jerusalem, they would change the dynamics of what was coming through Christ. I mean, through Jesus. He was supposed to be coming from over here. He told them they basically fulfilled the contract. He told them over here. And throughout the Bible, God has always been on a mountain, somewhere away from people. The transfiguration was on a mountain, away from people. Everything was, the world had to revolve without God being inside of it, bothering everything. Because you mess up history here, it messes up history down there
Okay?
in the future.
If, I think in this case, I was gonna use like a money analogy, but it's probably a bad thing to use when we're talking about what the angels spoke of. I think usually like the poor and lowly would be a better steward of certain things.
Okay.
Somebody who's maybe wealthier up there in politics. And the money analogy was gonna be, give $1,000 to a homeless person. You're probably gonna keep it in a better spot than somebody who has $1 million. Something like that. May not get messed up or too muddy to give it to somebody of low position.
Right. Now I'm not making the same parallel, although there is somewhat of a parallel here. And don't jump to conclusions here, but when you're watching the news and they're looking for some bystander to interview about what just happened.
Go to Walmart.
Do I? Yeah, go to Walmart. They don't normally go up to the guy in the suit, and I'm not saying that they should go to the guy in the suit, but what often happens when you get somebody on camera who feels like they are somebody, they try to be so careful with their words that they never really get much said. But you get some redneck guy out there, and what happened? Oh man, you should have seen it. I was there. Come on. And he's just telling everything. He doesn't care. Yeah. Yeah. What's that song? Third Rock from the Sun by Joe Diffie.
Yeah.
She swears a giant alien has landed at the mall, and it all started with kids jumping in a car that the guy left running because he'd gone in the quick stop to get some beer, and they took off and they hit the big boy at the Shoney's restaurant, and it knocked over the power lines. And it's a song. It's a country song. It's a good song, and it's the truth. And he said, all the chaos makes perfect sense when you back up and look at it, because that's just the way life is.
Don't worry, that's recorded.
What's that?
Don't worry, I've got all of that recorded.
We got all that recorded. Good. We don't want to forget that or lose that.
Marty, they had, the Jews at that time also had great stock in angel worship.
Okay.
Not just the angels, but they really got into it. The rabbis and all that at that time were quite often pushing, not exactly, the worship, but the reverence, I guess I should say, toward the angels, because the angels were direct messengers from God. So therefore, they needed to put them on a much higher elevation than a normal man.
Right.
It's like Carrie was saying, when you went to Walmart, the only people who talk to you are those people. The guys in suits are running the other way.
Yeah.
They're not going to talk to you. So when they got the angels, this was like getting a hold of a guy in a suit. We're talking to this guy now.
And back to the angels. How many descriptions do we have of angels? Now, we've got descriptions of the seraphim and descriptions of the cherubim. Ezekiel gives us descriptions of the cherubim, and Isaiah gives us descriptions of the seraphim. And it's weird. Don't try to draw it. Yeah, they're scary, weird looking, hard to put on paper. But when the angels appeared to people, what did they look like? They look like people. They look like men. And the only time we get a physical description of them is when it's pertinent to the account. When they got to the grave at the resurrection, there were angels, and they appeared to be glowing and white. But normally they just look like men. How many angels do we know their names? Actual angels. It's 3. Michael the archangel, Gabriel, mentioned here, and Harold. Y'all have heard the song, Hark, Herald Angel Sings.
I've also heard women referred to as angels, and that is, there's no such thing in the Bible.
Right, there's never an angel depicted as a woman. I'm telling you, just making stuff up now.
That the angels announced the birth of the Lamb of God to shepherds.
Yes. Not only the Lamb of God, but who would become the Good Shepherd. It's so poetic when you think about it. And then you go back to James. James was writing to the church, and in the 2nd chapter, he was laying it on heavy, and he was lambasting the church because somebody with money and finery would come into their assembly, and they would give him a position of honor, and somebody else would come in who didn't look that good, and they would say, "Oh, you sit here by my footstool." Not even on my footstool, by my footstool. And James said, aren't the poor the ones who are generally rich in faith, and you've demeaned them? Leslie?
I was sitting here thinking, listening to all the comments about how I think it was supposed to be more low-key. The birth of Jesus it wasn't his time to shine. And had he gone to the political leaders or the religious leaders, they would have made a huge production out of it and been, sharing the news all over. And this was more of a, let's get him here type thing. And by coming to the shepherds, the news spread, but it wasn't so widespread as it would have been had they gone to someone important.
Right, and maybe it was seen as unofficial. See, all this is really good discussion. What I hope we do with all this is realize we're just thinking through and try to figure some things out because we're not told any of this stuff. Why? We just know this is the way it was, and we might come up with the questions. Don? That was all part of the plan. We ask these questions, and even when we find answers, we don't know that they're the right answers. But for me, what this kind of stuff does, it helps me think through and examine and appreciate what God has done. And what God always seems to do, at least what he's always done in history, is what we never would have imagined. And what that does for me is, I just announced my mother-in-law's got cancer. What's going to happen? I don't have a clue. God going to do something about it? Well, he might. But whatever he does, it's not going to be something that I will ever be able to say, that's what I thought he was going to do, because he's God. His thoughts are above my thoughts. His ways are above my ways. If he's always done things we never could have imagined in the past, why in the world would we think we're going to be able to imagine what he does in the future? The only guarantees we have is what he says. And what he says is, I'm coming back. And I'm coming back when you won't expect me. So you keep watch. You be faithful. You keep doing what you need to do, and when I get back, I'm going to reward you. And you won't know the day that I'm coming. Boom, I'm going to be there. And you're going to say, wow, we never imagined it would be like this. I said, duh. Have I ever done anything that you would have imagined I would have done? God just works that way. He always does. He's God. We are not. He says, have faith in me. And we say, okay. Why did you send your son in the situation? Well, that was the best way to do it. Why did you tell the shepherds instead of well, that was the best way to do it. I don't know if I'd have done it that way. Well, you'd have done it wrong. I did it the right way. So, Bobby?
Still behind there, one of the other names that we forgot was Beelzebub.
Okay. Well, if you want to go that route, there's a. He's got all kinds of names, actually. And then if you wanted to go to the Revelation, it's not a literal angel, but it's an angel nevertheless, Apollyon. I like the Hebrew name Abaddon, because it just sounds so good in English. He's Abaddon. All right, that's our second bell. We got to quit. I enjoyed the discussion tonight. I hope you did. We'll come back next week and read some more and discuss some more, Lord willing.